Final Fantasy The Four Heroes of Light is an adventure that aimed to take the series back to its roots, and for the most part it succeeded in doing so. You play as Brant, who decides to visit the king for his birthday, and after something goes amiss at the castle, you're asked to investigate the cause, which eventually spirals into a huge quest to save multiple nations throughout the world. It's incredibly simplistic and cliche, but it works well for the game that's presented in a sort of storybook fashion as you take on each of the four characters' quests. This usually involves exploring the various towns that make up the world and fighting your way through one of the many dungeons that lie beneath them. Here you'll meet all manner of enemies that each pose a real threat, as early on you're not really equipped to hold your own and have to be extremely careful in battle. Speaking of battles, this is where the Heroes of Light deviates from the usual turn-based setup, as you're not able to target individual foes and instead your attacks are beholden to what type of weapon your character is using. For example, bows will hit the back row of enemies whereas swords will hit the front. This lack of control would seem like a bad idea on first glance, but it does add a sense of excitement to each encounter, and largely succeeds in creating something unique and enjoyable. The usual RPG elements such as equipment and items also play a role in how your characters operate, and can even entirely change their class on a whim, which allows the player to tailor each party member's abilities to their liking. If you're able to throw your preconceptions about the series out the window, then the Heroes of Light is definitely worth trying, as you'll be hard pressed to find anything else like it. Black Sigil is very much a traditional RPG that harkens back to the 16-bit era and presents an adventure that's not without its flaws, but does a good job in creating a pretty decent journey to undertake. Set in the realm of Lenora, where each of its inhabitants have the ability to wield magic, you take on the role of Kairu, who mysteriously doesn't possess this talent like those around him. After being banished from his town, a fairly familiar RPG storyline ensues, with a militaristic empire, an ancient evil, and a mysterious history to unravel. What sets Black Sigil apart from both its peers and the RPGs of the past is not its main storyline, but the very smart dialogue and interaction between its characters. There's a serious amount of charm to it all, and an often potent sense of humour that surrounds each person you meet. Of course, the world building and story would mean nothing without an equal amount of engaging gameplay to accompany it, and thankfully Black Sigil hits the ground running. You've got your basic turn-based setup when it comes to combat that shares a lot in common with the likes of Chrono Trigger. You have a bar that fills over time and you can act when it's full. The addition to this formula is the ability to move around freely, which results in you having to take weapon range into account as well. Apart from the standard series of attacks you'd expect, each character can learn up to 8 special techniques that consume SP once they're pulled off, and all of them have a wide range of capabilities, with some hitting a single target, whereas others hit multiple, adding a nice amount of strategy to each fight you find yourself in. On the whole, if you're a fan of the RPGs of old, then Black Sigil will be right up your street, and whilst it's not without its flaws, it's still an adventure that's truly worth undertaking. Shin Megami Tensei is one of the longest running RPG franchises, with its roots reaching back to the days of the Super Nintendo. Strange Journey on the DS is one entry in the series that's often overlooked when compared to others like Nocturne on the PS2 that comes along with all of the weirdness the games are known for, as well as one of the best narratives. Without going into too much detail, a strange energy disturbance begins to occur in the South Pole. It appears to be a dimensional portal and destroys everything it comes into contact with, and all of the world's countries unite, pool their best technology together, and send a team of scientists to investigate. You play as one of the crew in this mission, and soon find yourself waking up in a strange world that reflects the Earth. This space is occupied by demons, spirits, and gods, which soon take on a major role in the game, with the player being able to recruit them into their ranks as they try to figure out a way back home. As with most SMT games, battles take center stage and play out in a turn-based fashion that's built around a mechanic known as Demon Co-op. Basically, if you exploit an enemy's weakness, you'll automatically initiate a co-op attack, which is where your other party members attack the enemy at the same time, generally resulting in massive amounts of damage. Like many of the other entries in the series, fusion is also present in the game that allows you to mix several of the demons you'll find throughout the adventure together to create entirely new monsters to utilize in battle. This system offers up near endless possibilities, and it's here where Strange Journey truly shines. For players looking to experience something that feels entirely unique, Strange Journey would make for a great choice, especially for fans of old school dungeon crawlers. The Sonic series is no stranger to exploring different genres, and the Dark Brotherhood on the DS was the first time it dipped its toes into the world of RPGs. Like many others of its kind, it's mainly split into two styles of play, that being battles and the other exploring the world. What sets it apart, however, is how it utilizes the unique aspects of the DS, and this mainly comes into play during combat. It takes on a turn-based system where you naturally use the stylus to select one of several options, such as attacking, using items, or carrying out one of the many unique powerful moves that each party member possesses. Whenever you use one of these moves or the enemy pulls off a special attack, you can use the stylus to either make yours do more damage or to make the enemy attacks do less. It's a pretty cool system that sees areas for the player to tap appearing on the screen and only allowing a small window for you to succeed in hitting them. It sounds simple for sure, but as the game progresses and you learn more powerful abilities, these short sections of tapping increasingly become more challenging, and this system alone adds a unique spin on the tried and tested formula that's found in most RPGs. On top of this, exploring the world thoroughly also has its benefits, as throughout the world you'll find various Chow eggs, and once they hatch you can equip that Chow to aid you in battle. Some of them increase your health or MP after every battle turn, while others give all of your attacks elemental powers that help chip away at the enemy's health more effectively. This system is the perfect way to blend both styles of play and rewards those that go out of their way to explore every corner of the world in a meaningful but useful way. As a fan of the BioWare of old, Sonic Chronicles was a huge surprise. Even though it's not without its issues, it's still a solid adventure that will bring a smile to any Sonic fan that plays it. Infinite Space is by far one of the most overlooked RPGs on the DS, that simply put is one huge, expansive game that weaves an incredible story that spans the entire universe. You play as Yuri, a young man who finds himself tangled up in the political intrigue of several nations, battles against space pirates, and the ever-growing ambition of a deadly empire, hell-bent on taking everything for themselves. There's a lot to the game's story, and it's easily one of the most impressive aspects of the experience that's thankfully matched by its gameplay. You get to command a huge fleet of ships, and once you engage in battle, there are three main things you need to keep in mind. First, the distance between your fleets and the respective range of your weaponry. Second, your own command gauge, which when filled allows you to issue commands such as firing or dodging. And finally, the enemy's own command gauge, which tells you exactly what moves they can make. It takes on a sort of rock paper scissors approach to each battle, where dodges work against barrages and regular fire is weak but cannot be dodged. Apart from battles, acquiring ships and managing your crew also become just as important, where you must assign crew members to specific jobs on your fleet, with each having their own distinct characteristics and attributes that can contribute to your success in several ways. May that be more firepower, faster healing, as well as your command gauge filling up more quickly, allowing you to attack with more veracity. This part of the game will keep you busy for hours on end, as you endlessly tweak your team and work towards building a truly formidable force. Infinite Space is one of the biggest, most ambitious RPGs on the DS, and it's a real shame it's never seen a sequel or a remake for different platforms. Here's hoping that one day it makes a return. The Mana games have long been some of my favourite RPGs, and Children of Mana on the DS was no exception. It takes place after the events of Swords of Mana, and the realm of Elusia has finally started to settle down. Everyone lives in small townships scattered across multiple continents, each person living a seemingly simple and humble life. Of course, it's not long until everything goes south, with mystical beasts and dangerous monsters popping up around the world, prompting a handful of heroes to go on a quest to hopefully set things right once and for all. It's essentially an action RPG that's set across a series of dungeons, all filled with plenty of threats and obstacles that will test your skill and ultimately your ability to nurture your character's abilities effectively over the course of the game. Weapons that you purchase or find can only be used after your character reaches a certain level, so there's a healthy break-in system that the game maintains to ensure that the gameplay doesn't become overly easy. Complementing this is the gem system that sees you being able to equip your character with various gems that enhance certain combat abilities or character stats. This gives you the freedom to tailor your character to your specific approach on how you play the game, may that be focusing on damage or taking a more cautious approach and focusing on healing or defense. To top it off, there are 9 spirits in this game that can accompany you on your travels, with each of them offering up another means to tackle enemies and help you out when you're in a tough spot. Whether or not you're gonna like Children of Mana depends on how you approach the game. If you expect this to be the second coming of secretive manner, then you're gonna leave disappointed. But if you take it for what it is, and that's a simple, action-packed RPG, then it will more than satisfy your expectations. Nights in the Nightmare is a rather unique game that seamlessly blends together two genres that on paper would not be your first choice, that being tactical RPGs and shmups. Trying to explain the gameplay mechanics is no easy task, and is something that is much easier to just experience than hear about, but I'll try my best to lay it out. In Nights you interact with the game primarily using the DS stylus to control a wisp, a little ball of light that can be moved around the battlefield. The wisp has the power to give life to ghosts, and you use these ghosts to fight off many of the monsters throughout the game. When you drag the wisp to a ghost, you can then launch attacks against your foes. However, the monsters you encounter can't attack the ghost that you use yourself, and instead attack your wisp, launching bullets all over the screen. Anytime your ball of light is touched by a bullet, you lose a few seconds on your time gauge, and when it runs out, that round of the battle ends. Enemies can only be destroyed using special charged attacks, and special attacks can only be used when you have enough power stored up. You get that power from performing low damage attacks against the enemies and using the wisp to gather up the crystals that fly out of them when they get hit. This makes each battle, no matter how insignificant, all the more engaging, and when you couple it with the other activities in the game such as upgrading equipment or merging your ghosts to improve their effectiveness, it's an absolute winning formula that makes Nights in the Nightmare a truly refreshing experience that can't easily be sorted into a particular genre. If you're looking for a fun, addictive game to lose countless hours to, then this is one that's well worth considering. It's also available on the PSP, but personally the DS version is by far the better option. The fusion between the Wizard of Oz and the world of RPGs is probably the last thing you would think of happening, but back in 2009, Mediavision brought us Beyond the Yellow Brick Road, which was a complete reimagining of the classic movie, all the while retaining aspects of it that longtime fans know and love. You take on the part of Dorothy and soon come into contact with many of the other well-known characters as you're tasked by Oz himself to track down 10 mysterious eggs scattered throughout the kingdom in order for him to become the king again. What at first seems like a simple goal soon opens up into a grand adventure that sees you visiting a huge range of locations and meeting a cast of charming NPCs that really adds to the world the game creates. In terms of gameplay, simple would be the best way to describe it, as nearly everything throughout the game is handled by using the stylus, from movement to selecting your attacks, and because of it, the game opens itself to players of all ages and skill levels, but once you dig deeper, it's clear that its simple exterior hides a lot more depth than you would imagine. This comes from the several RPG systems that comprise the game. Of course, you've got battles, which are all presented in a turn-based fashion, and you'll be earning experience points and leveling up along the way as well. And it's here you'll unlock several abilities, as well as having the opportunity to switch up your equipment that can be found throughout the world and severely impacts your party's effectiveness against enemies. This is by far one of the console's most endearing RPGs. The gameplay combined with the visuals and music add up to create something that will captivate anyone that plays it. So if you're looking for an RPG on the DS, don't let this one slip by without trying it out for yourself. The best way to describe Awakened Shadow would be that it's seemingly a carbon copy of Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles with a blue dragon touch. It's basically a dungeon crawler, and instead of shoehorning you into the role of one of the established characters of the series, the story centers around your own unique character that awakens with amnesia. It takes place several years after the previous game, with your appearance coinciding with a mysterious event that has taken away the ability to wield shadows from many of the world's people. These are powerful entities that give their owners the capacity to conduct magic and naturally soon become a huge part of the game. As you begin to explore dungeons and add many of the people you meet to your party, it becomes clear that fighting and crafting is what lies at the center of the experience. Everything plays out in real time, where you can roll, dodge, defend, attack and use spells. This is done through the shadows, and you can have up to 6 of them and can lend them to your party members to utilize as well. Different shadows will increase different stats and will change the battle tactics you'll have to deploy in order to overcome the challenges in front of you. Upon defeating enemies, you'll gather a huge quantity of items that are used to craft upgrades for your equipment, and there are several possibilities that opens up many ways to grow your character. Now, one aspect of the game that's noticeable the minute you start playing are the visuals, which fully utilize the power of the DS to create a believable world for all of the action to play out in. From each character to each location and effect that accompanies magic attacks, there's a distinct amount of flair that comes along with everything you do in the game, making it one of the handheld's most impressive RPGs. Solar to Robo is one of, if not the most creative and charming RPGs you'll find on the DS. It's all about a hunter named Red who lives in the sky with his trusty robot and takes on jobs to help the population of the various flying islands prosper. It shares a lot in common with Tail Concerto on the PS1 and is essentially a spiritual successor, but it still manages to carve out its own path and create something incredibly special. At the center of the gameplay is the concept of lifting and throwing, which plays into just about everything you'll be doing throughout the game. May that be solving puzzles or taking on one of the many battles, the simple mechanic is beholden to a gauge that requires you to tap frantically in order to pick things up. It's pretty much the main thing you'll be doing in the first half of the game, until it opens up to offer more ways to interact with the world through one of the various upgrades that you'll come across. This is where the RPG elements come into play, where you'll be leveling up and increasing one of the many attributes that dictate your effectiveness in the world. May that be your strength, speed or defense, they all have a role to play, and what helps break the gameplay up are the several genres that are thrown into the mix as well. From short flying sections to the huge emphasis upon platforming, it all ends up feeling like the perfect blend, where you never quite know what the game is going to throw at you next, and subsequently it'll keep you on your toes throughout your playthrough. Overall, Solar to Robo is simply one of the best games you'll find on the DS that has sadly been forgotten by the larger gaming community as a whole. This game is worth the time of anyone who cares to check it out, and will no doubt leave a lasting impression on those who do. Well, that does it for today's video. Keep an eye out for part 2 as that will be coming up soon, so don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to get notified about new videos which release every Monday and Thursday. You can follow me on all of the socials which are linked below to stay up to date, and also join my growing community on Discord to continue the conversation with and to take part in giveaways as well. I'd like to give a special shout out to my Patreon supporters for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining my Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you'll find all of these links down below. Thanks for taking the time to check the video out. I'll catch you next time.